Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chief Moore, thank you so much for being here with us today. I'm Melanie Stansbury. I represent New Mexico's 1st Congressional District, which includes the Albuquerque area and 10 counties in central New Mexico. And I want to start by, first of all, saying thank you. We had a fairly large wildfire breakout in Lincoln County on the southern tip of my district just 2 weeks ago. Yes. And your incident command and all of the Forest Service guys who are out on the ground have done just an exemplary job. And I wanted to commend them and thank them for all of their work. The early days of that fire were there was some communication challenges with some of the local residents, but your incident command got there, and they now have it almost completely contained. Folks are back in their homes, so I just want to say thank you. Oftentimes the Forest Service doesn't get their flowers for the good work that they do, so we really appreciate it. And I also want to say thank you to all the hotshot crews and firefighters who are out there on the ground. I'm sure a lot of this has been covered this morning, but obviously we're seeing a huge increase in both the number of fires and intensity of fires. And in New Mexico, this is certainly the case across the state, and the wildfire season is shifting dramatically earlier. I mean, we're already having fires across the state, and it's only May. And so the questions I wanted to ask today are really about community collaborations with the Forest Service and resources that are available. And so I want to kind of ask them in two tranches. One is about resources that are available to help communities that want to engage in forest thinning and treatments to help prevent fires, as well as some of the challenges we're seeing working with utilities, especially with climate change and how it's changing mitigation activities. So if we could start talking about utilities. One of the challenges that we're seeing in New Mexico is that the current guidance, both from Forest Service and just the way in which utilities have managed their power lines, and I know this is true in California as well, is that they had certain easements and cutbacks in terms of how close the forest was allowed to grow to the power lines. And just, I believe it was 3 years ago, we had a McBride fire in Lincoln County where we had 90-mile-an-hour winds, and we had a sapling that crossed with a power line and basically ignited a massive fire. And the utilities were in the correct cutback zone, but with that kind of wind intensity, it still happened. And so one of the things we're hearing, and I know this is a problem across the West, is that utilities just don't have the resources. And Forest Service, of course, is also strapped in terms of manpower to get those mitigation easements cleaned up. So talk to us about what resources are available. In my personal opinion, it is not acceptable to cut power to communities for days at a time. And absent resources, that's what our utilities are talking about doing. So what's available? How do we deal with this problem?
So first of all, thank you for that question, because we've been actively engaged with the utility industry over the course of the last couple of years, because we know that that's a real critical area and the contributions to fire or mitigations from fires. So some of the things that we've done, and we started this in California, where we've streamlined our processes so that utility companies don't have to come and get permission every time they do routine maintenance under their power lines. And so we've been doing that across the country over the last couple of years, trying to see where and how we can streamline processes so that we're not a limiting factor for treating underneath those power lines. The other issue, which we don't talk about too, though, is the whole issue around liability. And it's something that is there. We're going to have those tough conversations around it. And there are no solutions right now, but that's one of the biggest challenges that I see, particularly for the small rural cooperatives. They just don't have the ability when fires strike. And so it's a critical area for us. We have to look at that, because just like you, I don't see no scenario where we're not going to provide electricity to a lot of our rural users.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, it's not just a climate mitigation issue and a public safety issue. I mean, this is people's lives on the line. We're talking about in Lincoln County, for example, if they cut power to a community like Ruidoso, we're talking hospitals, clinics, I mean, this is going to actually impact real lives in the local economy in this rural area. The other piece I get asked all the time, we have 23 tribal nations in New Mexico. They absolutely would like to partner with the Forest Service to do forest treatments, but are struggling to identify where the money is, how to engage in those conversations. What part of the Forest Service is the best point of contact to understand how to access these infrastructure and IRA monies and those co-stewardship agreements?
Well, typically, depending on the location, they should be contacting the forest supervisor. And if that forest supervisor is not available, I mean, the regional forester. But, you know, my office, if you just can't get any help, and for someone like you, if you contact me or my office, that's another way to get that pushed down. But normally, if everything was working as it should be, then our tries to be working with the forest supervisor.
Excellent. You know, maybe a follow-up on this, and we'd love to engage with you all on this, is to ask your forest supervisors at large to do more proactive engagement with our tribes and consultation on funding resources available.
Yeah, Congresswoman, I don't know if you're aware, but we have developed a whole tribal action plan. And a part of that plan is to educate the entire workforce on tribal issues. And so we have moved to make great strides in that area. In fact, we've changed our state and private forestry name to state, private, and tribal. And so we are making tremendous amount of strides in trying to improve the relationships with a lot of our tribal communities.
Excellent. Well, I think at the end of the day,
The
it really
gentlelady's
comes down-
time has expired.
Oh, I'm just going to wrap up my sentence. We'd love to engage with you on that issue. It's really important to our tribal nations. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Appreciate
You're
it.
welcome for the extra time. I'd like to recognize the gentleman from Oregon for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr.